butterfly in the sky. I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere, friends to know and ways to grow, a reading rainbow. I can be anything. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow. A reading rainbow.
It's Rico's Reads. Gather around, boys and girls, with your blankets, your pillows, and your favorite alcoholic beverages, and listen to Uncle Rico read you a story. And now here's your host, Rico DiGiorgio.
What's up? How's everybody doing tonight? Or today? Night? Whatever. Might as well be night. All right. Check out what Steph made. I'm all Harry Pottered in, ready to rock and roll. Let's give it a couple minutes. Last minute strugglers. I did invite some other people. My sister actually might show up, but I doubt it. She may or may not have the time. Steph, do you know if Jen is going to join us? Maybe, Kateri, maybe. I was on the phone with my sister for an hour, and I told her I had to jump off and do this. She's like, oh, yeah, send me the invite. Maybe I'll be there. Okay. All right. Still, give it a couple minutes. I know I said last week I should avoid the carbonation, but past couple days I kind of need this, so. All right, drinking margarita. Get your butter beer on, your fire whiskey, smoke your gillyweed, and let's get to some Harry Pothead. So if you remember last week, I didn't finish the chapter, but we're definitely gonna finish this chapter. Harry left the locker room alone sometime later to take his Nimbus 2000 back to the broom shed. He couldn't ever remember feeling happier. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one could say he was just a famous name anymore. The evening air had never smelled so sweet. He walked over the damp grass, reliving the last hour in his head, which was a happy blur. Gryffindors running to lift him onto their shoulders, Ron and Hermione in the distance, jumping up and down, Ron cheering through a heavy nosebleed. Harry had reached the shed. He leaned against the wooden door and looked up at Hogwarts, with its windows glowing red in the setting sun. Gryffindor in the lead. He'd done it. He'd shown Snape. And speaking of Snape, a hooded figure came swiftly down the front steps of the castle. Clearly not wanting to be seen, it walked as fast as possible toward the Forbidden Forest. Harry's victory faded from his mind as he watched. He recognized the figure's prowling walk. Snape, sneaking into the forest while everyone else was at dinner. What was going on? Harry jumped back on his Nimbus 2000 and took off. Gliding silently over the castle, he saw Snape enter the forest at a run. He followed. The trees were so thick that he couldn't see where Snape had gone. He flew in circles, lower and lower, brushing the top branches of trees until he heard voices. He glided toward them and landed noiselessly in a towering beech tree. He climbed carefully along one of the branches, holding tight to his broomstick, trying to see through the leaves. Below, in a shadowy clearing, stood Snape, but he wasn't alone. Quirrell was there, too. Harry couldn't make out the look on his face, but he was stuttering worse than ever. Harry strained to catch what they were saying. Don't know why you wanted to meet here of all places, Severus. Oh, I thought we'd keep this private, said Snape, his voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone, after all. Harry leaned forward. Quirrell was mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. Have you found out how to get past the beast of Hagrid's yet? But, Severus, You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell, said Snape, taking a step toward him. I don't know what you... You know perfectly well what I mean. An owl hooted loudly, and Harry nearly fell out of the tree. He steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, "You little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting." Oh, Smoke is here. Happy birthday, Smoke. Good to see you, man. Very well, Snape cut in. We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie. He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. It was almost dark now, but Harry could see Quirrell standing quite still, as though he were petrified. Harry, where have you been? Hermione squeaked. We won! We won! We won! Shouted Ron, thumping Harry on the back. And I gave Malfoy a black eye, and Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed. He's still out cold, but Madame Pomfrey says he'll be all right. Talk about showing Slytherin. Everyone was waiting for you in the common room. We're having a party. Fred and George stole some cakes and stuff in the kitchens. Never mind that now, said Harry breathlessly. Let's find an empty room. You wait till you hear this. He made sure Peeves wasn't inside before shutting the door behind them. Then he told them what he'd seen and heard. So we were right. It is the Sorcerer's Stone, and Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things got in the stone apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments, probably, and Quirrell would have done some anti-Doc Ock spell that Snape needs to break through. So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell really stands up to Snape? Said Hermione in alarm. It'll be gone by next Tuesday, said Ron. End of chapter 13. Yes, CJ, I think you did miss the Quidditch match. Ah, thanks, Smoke. I mean, obviously, if you want to spend time with your family or some shit, we totally understand, I guess. But, you know, you do you, buddy. Chapter 14, Norbert, the Norwegian Ridgeback. Oh, it's the cake. I get it. What, my cake isn't, good and beautiful? Quirrell, however, must have been braver than they thought. In the weeks that followed, he did seem to be getting paler and thinner, but it didn't look as though he'd cracked yet. That's true. Every time they passed the third floor corridor, Harry, Ron, and Hermione would press their ears to the door to check that Fluffy was still growling inside. Snape was sweeping about in his usual bad temper, which surely meant that the stone was still safe. Whenever Harry passed Quirrell these days, he gave him an encouraging sort of smile, and Ron had started telling people off for laughing at Quirrell's stutter. Hermione, however, had more on her mind than the Sorcerer's Stone. She had started drawing up study schedules and color-coding all her notes. Harry and Ron wouldn't have minded, but she kept nagging them to do the same. Hermione, the exams are ages away. 10 weeks, Hermione snapped. That's not ages. It's like a second to Nicholas Flamel. But we're not 600 years old, Ron reminded her. Anyway, what are you studying for? You already know it all. What am I studying for? Are you crazy? You realize we need to pass these exams to get into the second year? They're very important. I should have started studying a month ago, but I don't know what's gotten into me. Unfortunately, the teachers seem to be thinking along the same lines as Hermione. They piled so much homework on them that the Easter holidays weren't nearly as much as fun as the Christmas ones. It was hard to relax with Hermione next to you reciting the 12 uses of dragon's blood or practicing wand movements. Moaning and yawning, Harry and Ron spent most of their free time in the library with her, trying to get through all their extra work. I'll never remember this, Ron burst. out one afternoon, throwing down his quill and looking longingly out of the library window. It was the first really fine day they'd had in months. The sky was a clear, forget-me-not blue, and there was a feeling in the air of summer coming. Harry, who was looking up Dittany in 1,000 Magical Herbs and Fungi, didn't look up until he heard Ron say, "Hagrid, what are you doing in the library?" Hagrid shuffled into view, hiding something behind his back. He looked very out of place in his moleskin overcoat. "Bye, Smoke." Nah, he left. "Just looking," he said in a shifty voice that got their interest at once. "And what are you lot up to?" He looked suddenly suspicious. "You're not still looking for Nicholas Flamel, are you?" "Oh, we found out who he is ages ago," said Ron impressively. "And we know what that dog's guarding. It's a sorcerer's Shh! Hagrid looked quickly around to see if anyone was listening. "Don't go shouting about it. What's the matter with you?" "There are a few things we want to ask you, as a matter of fact," said Harry, "about what's guarding the stone apart from Fluffy." "Shh!" said Hagrid again. "Listen. Come and see me later. I'm not promising I'll tell you anything, mind, but don't go rabbing around in there. Students aren't supposed to know. They'll think I've told you." "See you later, then," said Harry. Hagrid fucked off. "What was he hiding behind his back?" said Hermione thoughtfully. "Do you think it had something to do with the Sorcerer's Stone?" "I'm going to go see what section he was in," said Ron, who had had enough of working. He came back a minute later with a pile of books in his arms and slammed them down on the table. "Dragons," he whispered. "Hagrid was looking up stuff about dragons. Look at these. Dragon species of Great Britain and Ireland. From Egg to Inferno. A Dragon Keeper's Guide." "Hagrid's always wanted a dragon. He told me so the first time I've ever met him," said Harry. "But it's against all laws," said Ron. "Dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. Yeah, everyone knows that." Fucking Ron. This is a dude who doesn't know half the shit, but he knows that. "It's hard to stop muggles from noticing us if we're keeping dragons in the back garden. Anyway, you can't tame dragons. It's dangerous. You should see the burns Charlie's got off the wild ones in Romania." "But there aren't wild dragons in Britain," said Harry. "Of course there are," said Ron. "Common Welsh green and Herbidian blacks. The Ministry of Magic had a job hushing them up, I could tell you. Our kind have to keep putting spells on muggles who spotted them to make them forget." "So what on earth is Hagrid up to?" said Hermione. When they knocked on the door of the gamekeeper's hut an hour later, they were surprised to see that all the curtains were closed. Hagrid called, "Who is it?" before he let them in, and then shut the door quickly behind them. It was stifling hot inside. Even though it was such a warm day, there was a blazing fire in the grate. Hagrid made them tea and offered them stoat sandwiches, which they refused. "So, you want to ask me something?" "Yes," said Harry. "There was no point beating around the bush. Hello. We were wondering if you could tell us what's guarding the Sorcerer's Stone apart from Fluffy." Hagrid frowned at him. "Course I can't," he said. "Number one, I don't know myself. Number two, you know too much already, so I wouldn't tell you if I could. That stone's here for a good reason. It was almost stolen out of Gringotts. Suppose you worked that out and all. Beats me how you even knew about Fluffy." "Oh, oh, come on, Hagrid. You might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on around here," said Hermione in a warm, flattering voice. Hagrid's beard twitched, and they could tell he was smiling. "We only wondered who had done the guarding, really," Hermione went on. "We wondered who Dumbledore had trusted enough to help him, apart from you. Damn, Hermione." Hagrid's chest swelled at these last words. Harry and Ron beamed at Hermione. And Jess is here. Hi, Jess. "Well, I don't suppose it could hurt to tell you that. Let's see. He borrowed Fluffy from me, and some of the teachers did enchantments. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Professor McGonagall. He ticked them off on his fingers. Professor Quirrell and Dumbledore himself did something, of course. Hang on, I've forgotten someone. Oh, yeah, Professor Snape." "Snape? Yeah, but you're still not on about that, are you? Look, Snape helped protect the stone. He's not about to steal it. Harry knew Ron and Hermione were thinking the same as he was. If Snape had been in on protecting the stone, it must have been easy to find out how the other teachers had guarded it. He probably knew everything, except it seemed Quirrell's spell and how to get past Fluffy. Oh, awesome, Jess. You're the only one who knows how to get past Fluffy, aren't you, Hagrid? Said Harry anxiously. And you wouldn't tell anyone, would you? Not even one of the teachers? Not a soul except me and Dumbledore, said Hagrid proudly. That's something, Harry muttered to the others. Hagrid, can we have a window open? I'm boiling. Can't, Harry, sorry, said Hagrid. Harry noticed and glanced at the fire. Harry looked at it too. Hagrid, what's that? But he already knew what it was. In the very heart of the fire, underneath the kettle, was a huge black egg. Ah, said Hagrid, fiddling nervously with his beard. That's, Where did you get it, Hagrid? Said Ron, crouching over the fire to get a closer look at the egg. It must have cost you a fortune. Won it, said Hagrid, last night. I was down in the village having a few drinks and got into a game of cards with a stranger. I think he was quite glad to get rid of it, to be honest. But what are you going to do with it when it's hatched? Said Hermione. Well, I've been doing some reading, said Hagrid, pulling a large book from under his pillow. Got to sell the library. Dragon breeding for pleasure and profit. It's a bit out of date, of course, but it's all in here. Keep the egg in the fire, 'cause their mothers breathe on them, see? And when it hatches, feed on a bucket of brandy mixed with chicken blood every half hour. And see here, how to recognize different eggs? That I got there is a Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare, them. He looked very pleased with himself, but Hermione didn't. Hagrid, you live in a wooden house, she said. But Hagrid wasn't listening. He was humming merrily as he stoked the fire. A little bit. What are you doing, stranger? What are you buying? It's hard to go Hagrid low. It's a little difficult. So now they had something else to worry about. What might happen to Hagrid if anyone found out he was hiding an illegal dragon in his hut? Wonder what it's like to have a peaceful life, Ron sighed, as evening after evening they struggled through all the extra homework they were getting. Hermione had now started making study schedules for Harry and Ron, too. It was driving them fucking nuts. Then, one breakfast time, Hedwig brought Harry another note from Hagrid. He had written only 2 words. It's hatching. Ron wanted to skip herbology and go straight down to the hut. Hermione wouldn't hear of it. Hermione, how many times in our lives are we going to see a dragon hatching? We've got lessons. We'll get into trouble, and that's nothing to what Hagrid's going to do when someone finds out what he's doing. Shut up, Harry whispered. Malfoy was only a few feet away, and he had stopped dead to listen. How much had he heard? Harry didn't like the look on Malfoy's face at all. Ron and Hermione argued all the way to herbology, and in the end, Hermione agreed to run down to Hagrid's with the other 2 during morning break. When the bell sounded from the castle at the end of their lesson, the 3 of them dropped their trowels at once and hurried through the grounds to the edge of the forest. Hagrid greeted them, looking flushed and excited. It's nearly out, he mushed at them inside. The egg was lying on the table. There were deep cracks in it. Something was moving inside. A funny clicking noise was coming from it. They all drew their chairs up to the table and watched with bated breath. All at once, there was a scraping noise, and the egg split open. The baby dragon flopped onto the table. It wasn't exactly pretty. Harry thought it looked like a crumpled black umbrella. Its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body. A long snout with wide nostrils, the stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. It sneezed. A couple of sparks flew out of its snout. Imagine when it fucking farts. Jesus. Isn't he beautiful? Hagrid murmured. He reached out a hand to stroke the dragon's head. It snapped at his fingers, showing pointed fangs. Oh, bless him, look, he knows his mummy, said Hagrid. Hagrid, said Hermione, how fast do Norwegian Ridgebacks grow exactly? Hagrid was about to answer when the color suddenly drained from his face. He leaped to his feet and ran to the window. What's the matter? Someone was looking through the gap in the curtains. It's a kid. He's running back up to school. Harry bolted the door and looked out. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking him. Malfoy had seen the fucking dragon. Something about the smile lurking on Malfoy's face during the next week made Harry, Ron, Hermione very, very nervous. They spent most of their free time in Hagrid's darkened hut, trying to reason with him. Just let him go, Harry urged. Set him free. I can't, said Hagrid. He's too little. He'd die. They looked at the dragon. He had grown 3 times in length in just a week. Smoke kept furling out of its nostrils. Hagrid hadn't been doing his gaming-keeping duties because the dragon was keeping him so busy. There were empty brandy bottles and chicken feathers all over the floor. I've decided to call him Norbert, said Hagrid, looking at the dragon with misty eyes. He really knows me now. Watch. Norbert, Norbert, where's Mummy? He's lost his marbles, Ron muttered in Harry's ear. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, give it 2 weeks and Norbert's going to be as long as your house. Malfoy could go to Dumbledore at any moment. Hagrid bit his lip. I know I can't keep him forever, but I just can't dump him. I can't. Harry suddenly turned to Ron. Charlie, he said. You're losing it too, said Ron. I'm Ron, remember? No, Charlie, your brother. Fucking idiot. Charlie is in Romania, studying dragons. We can send Norbert to him. Charlie can take care of him and then put him back in the wild. Brilliant, said Ron. How about it, Hagrid? And in the end, Hagrid agreed that they could send an owl to Charlie to ask him. The following week dragged by. Wednesday night found Hermione and Harry sitting alone in the common room. Long after everyone else had gone to bed, the clock on the wall had just chimed midnight when the portrait hole burst open. Ron appeared out of nowhere as he pulled off Harry's invisibility cloak. He had been down to Hagrid's hut, helping him feed Norbert, who was now eating dead rats by the crate. God damn. Bear with me, guys. I got some gunk in my eye. It bit me. Charlie bit me. Norbert bit me, he said, showing them his hand, which was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief. I'm not going to be able to hold a quilt for a week. I tell you, that dragon's the most horrible animal I've ever met. But the way Hagrid goes on about it, you'd think it was a fluffy little bunny rabbit. When it bit me, he told me off for frightening it. When I left, he was singing a fucking lullaby. There was a tap on the dark window. It's Hedwig, said Harry, hurrying to let her in. She'll have Charlie's answer. 3 of them put their heads together to read the note. Dear Ron, how are you? Thanks for the almost fucking Andrew Dice Clay. How are you? Thanks for the letter. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it won't be easy getting him here. Oh, I think the best thing will be to... Sorry. But I won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be send him over to some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Send me an answer as soon as possible. Love, Charlie. I didn't give Charlie a voice because what the fuck does he sound like? I don't know. I'm just going to make up some other random generic British voice. Nah, whatever. Although maybe I should just make Charlie sound like Andrew Dice Clay. That would just be fun. Oh, send me an answer as soon as possible. I'm sorry. Made myself laugh. They looked at one another. We've got the invisibility cloak, said Harry. It shouldn't be too difficult. I think the cloak's big enough to cover 2 of us and Norbert. It was a mark of how bad the last week had been. The other 2 agreed with him. Anything to get rid of Norbert. And Malfoy. There was a hitch. By the next morning, Ron's bitten hand had swollen to twice its usual size. He didn't know whether it was safe to go to Madame Pomfrey. Would she recognize a dragon bite? By the afternoon, though, he had no choice. The cut had turned a nasty shade of green. It looked as if Norbert's fangs were poisonous. Harry and Hermione rushed up to the hospital wing at the end of the day to find Ron in a terrible state in bed. It's not just my hand, he whispered, although that feels like it's about to fall off. Malfoy told Madame Pomfrey he wanted to borrow one of my books so he could come and have a good laugh at me. He kept threatening to tell her what really built me. I've told her it was a dog, but I don't think she believes me. I shouldn't have hit him at the Quidditch match. That's why he's doing this. Harry and Hermione tried to calm Ron down. It'll all be over at midnight on Saturday, said Hermione, but this didn't soothe Ron at all. On the contrary, he sat bolt upright and broke into a sweat. Midnight on Saturday, he said in a hoarse voice. Oh no, I've just remembered. Charlie's letter was in that book Malfoy took. He's going to know we're getting rid of Norbert. Harry and Hermione didn't have a chance to answer. Madame Pomfrey came over at that moment and made them fuck off, saying Ron needed sleep. It's too late to change the plan now, Harry told Hermione. We haven't got time to send Charlie another owl. And this could be our only chance to get rid of Norbert. We'll have to risk it. And we have got the invisibility cloak. Malfoy doesn't know about that. I don't know why I phrased that weird. Anyways, they found Fang the Boarhound sitting outside with a bandaged tail when they went to tell Hagrid, who opened a window to talk to them. Won't let you in, he puffed. Norbert's at a tricky stage. Nothing I can't handle. When they told him about Charlie's letter, his eyes filled with tears, although that might have been because Norbert had just bitten him on the leg. Arr! It's all right. He's only got my boot. Just playing. He's only a baby after all. The baby banged its tail on the wall, making the windows rattle. Harry and Hermione walked back to the castle feeling Saturday couldn't come quickly enough. They would have felt sorry for Hagrid when the time came for him to say goodbye to Norbert if they hadn't been so worried about what they had to do. It was a very dark, cloudy night, and they were a bit late arriving at Hagrid's hut because they'd had to wait for Peeves to get out of the way at the entrance hall, where he'd been playing tennis against the wall. Hagrid had Norbert packed and ready in a large crate. He got lots of rats and some brandy for the journey, said Hagrid in a muffled voice. And I packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely. From inside the crate came ripping noises that sounded to Harry as though the teddy was having his head torn off. Bye-bye, Norbert, Hagrid sobbed as Harry and Hermione covered the crate with the invisibility cloak and stepped underneath it themselves. Mummy will never forget you. How they managed to get the crate back up to the castle, they never knew. Midnight ticked nearer as they heaved Norbert up the marble staircase up in the entrance hall and along the dark corridors. They literally learned a spell about how to levitate shit. Like, I get that the cloak won't cover them and the crate, but like, you could win Guardian Leviosa the shit out of that, right? Up another staircase, then another. Even one of Harry's shortcuts didn't make the work much easier. Nearly there, Harry panted as they reached the corridor beneath the tallest tower. Then a sudden movement ahead of them made them almost drop the crate. Well, Felicia, I do occasionally swear, but for the most time, it's pretty clean. Like it's PG-13. There's a couple R-rated, F-bombs. It's your call. There are children that do listen to this from time to time, so it really depends on what words you want them to learn eventually. But I'll tell you this much: if you let me know in advance, I will try to make it cleaner. I don't want to offend a parent, parents or fuck up kids that much. As I said. Forgetting they were already invisible, they shrank into the shadows, staring at the dark outlines of two people grappling with each other 10 feet away. A lamp flared. Professor McGonagall, in a tartan bathrobe and a hairnet, had Malfoy by the ear. Detention! She shouted. And 20 points from Slytherin! Slytherin! Wandering around in the middle of the night. How dare you! You don't understand, Professor. Harry Potter's coming. He's got a dragon. What utter rubbish! How dare you tell such lies! Come on, I should see Professor Snape about you, Malfoy. The steep spiral staircase up at the top of the tower seemed the easiest thing in the world after that. Not until they stepped out in the cold night air did they throw off the cloak, glad to be able to breathe properly again. Hermione did a sort of jig. Malfoy's got attention. I could sing. Don't, Harry advised her. Chuckling about Malfoy, they waited. Norbert thrashing about in his crate. About 10 minutes later, 4 broomsticks came swooping down out of the darkness. Charlie's friends were a cheery lot. They showed Harry and Hermione the harness they'd rigged up so they could suspend Norbert between them. They all helped buckle Norbert safely into it, and then Harry and Hermione shook hands with the others and thanked them very much. At last, Norbert was going, gone. They slipped back down the spiral staircase, their hearts as light as their hands, now that Norbert was off them. No more dragon. Malfoy detention. What could spoil their happiness? The answer to that was waiting at the foot of the stairs. As they stepped into the corridor, Filch's face loomed suddenly out of the darkness. Well, we are in trouble. They left the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. Chapter 15. The Forbidden Forest. Things couldn't have been worse. Oh, just wait. You've got, 6 more books. Things could definitely get worse. Filch took them down to Professor McGonagall's study on the first floor, where they sat and waited without saying a word to each other. Hermione was trembling. Excuses, alibis, and wild cover-up stories chased each other around in Harry's brain, each more feeble than the last. He couldn't see how they were going to get out of the trouble this time. They were cornered. How could they have been so stupid as to forget the cloak? There was no reason on earth that Professor McGonagall would accept for their being out of bed and creeping around the school in the dead of night, let alone being up the tallest astronomy tower, which was out of bounds except for classes. And Norbert in the invisibility cloak, they might as well be packing their bags already. Had Harry thought that things couldn't have been worse, he was wrong. When Professor McGonagall appeared, she was leading Neville. Harry! Neville burst out the moment he saw the other two. I was trying to find you to warn you. I heard Malfoy saying he was going to catch you. He said you had a dread. Harry shook his head violently to shut Neville up, but Professor McGonagall had seen. She looked more likely to breathe fire than Norbert as she towered over the three of them. I would never have believed it of any of you. Mr. Filch says you were up in the astronomy tower. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Explain yourselves. It was the first time Hermione had ever failed to answer a teacher's question. She was staring at her slippers, as still as a statue. I would never have believed it of any of you. Oh, wait. I said that already. I think I've got a good idea of what's been going on, said Professor McGonagall. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. You fed Draco Malfoy some cock and bull story about the dragon, trying to get him out of bed and into trouble. I've already caught him. I suppose you think it's funny that Longbottom here heard the story and believed it too? Harry caught Neville's eye and tried to tell him without words that this wasn't true, because Neville was looking stunned and hurt. Poor, blundering Neville. Harry knew what it must have cost him to try and find him in the dark, to warn them. I'm disgusted, said Professor McGonagall. 4 students out of bed in one night. I've never heard such a thing before. You, Miss Granger, I thought you had more sense. As for you, Mr. Potter, I thought Gryffindor meant more to you than this. All 3 of you will receive detentions. Yes, you too, Mr. Longbottom. Nothing gives you the right to walk around school at night, especially these days. It's very dangerous. And 50 points will be taken from Gryffindor. 50. Harry gasped. They would lose the lead he'd won in the last Quidditch match. 50 points each, said Professor McGonagall, breathing heavily through her long pointed nose. Professor, please, you can't. Don't tell me what I can and can't do, Potter. Now get to bed, all of you. I've never been more ashamed of Gryffindor students. 150 points lost. That put Gryffindor in last place. In one night, they'd ruined any chance Gryffindor had had for the House Cup. Harry felt as though the bottom had dropped out of his stomach. How could they ever make up for this? Harry didn't sleep all night. He could hear Neville sobbing into his pillow for what seemed like hours. Harry couldn't think of anything to say to comfort him. He knew Neville, like himself, was dreading the dawn. What could happen when the rest of Gryffindors found out what they'd done? At first, Gryffindors passing the giant hourglasses that recorded the house points the next day thought there'd been a mistake. How could they suddenly have 150 points fewer than yesterday? And then the story started to spread. Harry Potter, the famous Harry Potter, their hero of 2 Quidditch matches, had lost them all those points, him and a couple of other stupid first years. From being one of the most popular and admired people at the school, Harry was suddenly the most hated. Even Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs turned on him because everyone had been longing to see Slytherin lose the House Cup. Everywhere Harry went, people pointed and didn't trouble to lower their voices as they insulted him. Slytherins, on the other hand, clapped as he walked past them, whistling and cheering. Thanks, Potter, we owe you one. Only Ron stood by him. They'll all forget this in a few weeks. Fred and George have lost loads of points in all the time they've been here, and people still like them. They've never lost 150 points in one go, though, have they? Said Harry miserably. Well, no, Ron admitted. It was a bit late to repair the damage, but Harry swore to himself not to meddle in things that weren't his business from now on. He'd had it with sneaking around and spying. He felt so ashamed of himself that he went to Wood and offered to resign from the Quidditch team. Resign? Wood thundered. What good will that do? How are we going to get any points back if we can't win at Quidditch? But even Quidditch had lost its fun. The rest of the team wouldn't speak to Harry during practice, and if they had to speak about him, they called him the Seeker. Hermione and Neville were suffering too. They didn't have as bad a time as Harry, because they weren't as well known, but nobody would speak to them either. Hermione had stopped drawing attention to herself in class, keeping her head down and working in silence. Harry was almost glad the exams weren't far away. All the studying he had to do kept his mind off his misery. He, Ron, and Hermione kept to themselves, working late into the night, trying to remember the ingredients in complicated potions, learn charms and spells by heart, memorize the dates of magical discoveries and goblin rebellions. I'm getting gunk in my eye. Then, about a week before the exams were due to start, Harry's new resolution not to interfere in anything that didn't concern him was put to an unexpected test. Walking back from the library on his own one afternoon, he heard somebody whimpering from the classroom up ahead. As he drew closer, he heard Quirrell's voice. No, no, not again, please. Sounded as though someone was threatening him. Harry moved closer. All right, he heard Quirrell sob. Next second, Quirrell came hurrying out of the classroom and straightening his turban. He was pale and looked as though he was about to cry. He strode out of sight. Harry didn't think Quirrell even noticed him. He waited until Quirrell's footsteps had disappeared, then peered into the classroom. It was empty, but a door stood ajar at the other end. He was halfway toward it before he remembered what he promised himself about not meddling. All the same, he'd have gambled 12 Sorcerer's Stones that Snape had just left the room, and from what Harry had just heard, Snape would be walking with a new spring in his step. Quirrell seemed to have given in at last. Harry went back to the library, where Hermione was testing Ron on astronomy. Harry told them what he'd heard. Snape's done it then, said Ron. If Quirrell's told him how to break his anti-Doc Full spell. It's still fluffy, though, said Hermione. Maybe Snape's found out how to get past him without asking Hagrid, said Ron, looking up at the thousands of books surrounding them. I bet there's a book somewhere in here telling you to get past the giant three-headed dog. So what do we do, Harry? The light of adventure was kindling again in Ron's eyes, but Hermione answered before Harry could. Go to Dumbledore. That's what we should have done ages ago. If we try anything ourselves, we'll be thrown out for sure. But we've got no proof, said Harry. Quirrell's too scared to back us up. Snape's only got to say he doesn't know how the troll got in Halloween, and that he was nowhere near the third floor. How do you think he'll believe him? Who do you think he'll believe, him or us? My eye keeps getting cloudy. It's not exactly a secret we hate him. Dumbledore would think we made it up to get him sacked. Filch wouldn't help us if his life depended on it. He's too friendly with Snape, and the more students get thrown out, the better, he'll think. And don't forget, we're not supposed to know about the stone or Fluffy. That'll take a lot of explaining. Hermione looked convinced, but Ron didn't. If we just do a bit of poking around. No, said Harry flatly. We've done enough poking around. He pulled the map of Jupiter toward him and started to learn the names of its boons. The following morning, notes were delivered to Harry, Hermione, and Neville at the breakfast table. They were all the same. Your detention will take place at 11 o'clock tonight. Meet Mr. Filch in the entrance hall, Professor M. McGonagall. So they're caught out late at night, and their punishment is to be out late at night. Okay. Harry had forgotten they still had detentions to do in the furor of the points they'd lost. He half expected Hermione to complain that this was a whole night of studying lost, but she didn't say a word. Like Harry, she felt they deserved what they got. At 11 o'clock that night, they said goodbye to Ron in the common room and went down to the entrance hall with Neville. Filch was already there, and so was Malfoy. Yeah, in the Forbidden Forest of all places. Like, hey, let's make it one of those dangerous places and have you do things? What happened to lines, man? Harry had also forgotten that Malfoy had gotten his attention, too. Follow me, said Filch, lighting a lamp and leading them outside. I bet you'll think twice about breaking a school rule again, won't you? He said, leering at them. Oh, yes, hard work and pain are the best teachers, if you ask me. It's just a pity they let the old punishments die out. Hang you by your wrists from the ceiling for a few days. I've got the chains still in my office. Keep 'em well oiled in case they're ever needed. Right, off we go. And don't think of running off now. It'll be worse for you if you do. I sound like an evil-ass Obi-Wan Kenobi. Oh, shit. They marched off across the dark grounds. Neville kept sniffling. Harry wondered what their punishment was going to be. It must be something really horrible, or Filch wouldn't be sounding so delighted. The moon was bright, but clouds scudding across it kept throwing them into the darkness. Ahead, Harry could see the lighted windows of Hagrid's hut. Then they heard a distant shout. That you, Filch? Hurry up! I want to get started. Harry's heart rose. They're going to be working with Hagrid. It might be so bad. Might not be so bad. His relief must have shown his face because Filch said, I suppose you think you'll be enjoying yourself with that oath? Well, think again, boy. Into the forest you're going, and I'm much mistaken if you all come out in one piece. Wow, what a douche. At this, Neville let out a little moan, and Malfoy stopped dead in his tracks. The forest, he repeated. He didn't sound quite as cool as usual. We can't go in there at night. There's all sorts of things in there. Werewolves, I heard. No, that's book 3. Neville clutched the sleeve of Harry's robe and made a choking noise. That's your problem, isn't it? Said Filch, his voice cracking with glee. Should have thought of them werewolves before you got in trouble, shouldn't you? Hagrid came striding toward them out of the dark, baying at his heel. He was carrying his large crossbow. A quiver of arrows hung over his shoulder. About time, he said. I've been waiting for half an hour already. All right, Harry. Hermione. Shouldn't be too friendly to them, Hagrid, said Filch coldly. They're here to be punished, after all. That's why you're late, is it? Said Hagrid, frowning at Filch. Been lecturing them, eh? It's not your place to do that. You've done your bit. I'll take over from here. I'll be back at dawn, said Filch, for what's left of them. he added nastily, and he turned and started back toward the castle, his lamp bobbing away in the darkness. Malfoy now turned to Hagrid. What are you buying? I'm not going to that forest, he said, and Harry was pleased to hear the note of panic in his voice. You are if you want to stay at Hogwarts, said Hagrid fiercely. You done wrong now, you've got to pay for it. What are you buying? But this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be copying lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he'd tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts, Hagrid growled. Copying lines. What's good of that to anyone? You'll do something useful or you'll get out. If you think your father rather you were expelled, then get back off to the castle and pack. Go on. Malfoy didn't move. He looked at Hagrid furiously, but then dropped his gaze. Right then, said Hagrid. Now listen carefully, because it's dangerous what we're going to do tonight. I don't want no one taking risks. Follow me over here a moment. He led them to the very edge of the forest. Holding his lamp up high, he pointed down a narrow, winding earth track that disappeared into the thick black trees. A light breeze lifted their hair as they looked into the forest. Look there, said Hagrid. See that stuff shining on the ground? Silvery stuff. That's unicorn blood. There's a unicorn in there been hurt badly by Summit. This is the second time in a week. I found one dead last Wednesday. We're going to try and find the poor thing. We might have to put it out of its misery. And what if whatever hurt the unicorn finds us first? Said Malfoy, unable to keep the fear out of his voice. We get it, J.K. Rowling. Malfoy's scared. We get it. God, there's nothing that lives in the forest that'll hurt you if you're with me or Fang. That's not exactly true, is it, Hagrid? And keep to the path. Right now, we're going to split into two parties and follow the trail in different directions. There's blood all over the place. It must have been staggering around since last night at least. I want Fang, said Malfoy quickly, looking at Fang's long teeth. All right, but I warn you, he's a coward, said Hagrid. So me, Harry, and Hermione will go one way, and Draco, Neville, and Fang will go the other. Now, if any of you finds the unicorn, we'll set up green sparks, right? Get your wands out and practice now. That's it. And if anyone gets in trouble, we'll set up red sparks, and we'll all come in and find you. So be careful. Let's go. The forest was black and silent. A little way into it, they reached a fork in the earth path, and Harry, Hermione, and Hagrid took the left path, while Malfoy, Neville, and Fang walked off to the right. They walked in silence, their eyes on the ground. Every now and then, a ray of moonlight through the branches above lit a spot of silver-blue blood on the fallen leaves. Harry could see that Hagrid looked very worried. Could a werewolf be killing the unicorns? Harry asked. Not fast enough, said Hagrid. It's not easy to catch a unicorn. They're powerful magic creatures. I never knew one to be hurt before. I like how Hagrid just nonchalantly just like, oh yeah, werewolves totally exist. And Harry's like, oh, okay. Like, I would be like, wait, werewolves exist? They walked past a mossy tree stump. Harry could hear running water. There must be a stream somewhere close by. There were still spots of unicorn blood here and there along the winding path. You all right, Hermione? Hagrid whispered. Don't worry, it can't have gone far if this badly hurt. Well, hang on. Don't worry, it can't have gone far if it's this badly hurt. And then we'll be able to get behind that tree. Hagrid seized Harry and Hermione and hoisted them off the path behind a towering oak. He pulled out an arrow and fitted it into his crossbow, raising it ready to fire. The three of them listened. Something was slithering over dead leaves nearby. It sounded like a cloak trailing along the ground. Hagrid was squinting up the dark path, but after a few seconds, the sound faded away. I knew it, he murmured. There's something in here that shouldn't be. A werewolf? Harry suggested. That wasn't no werewolf, and it wasn't no unicorn neither, said Hagrid grimly. Right. Follow me, but be careful now. They walked more slowly, ears straining for the faintest sound. Suddenly, in a clearing ahead, something definitely moved. Who's that? Hagrid called. Show yourself. I'm armed. And into the clearing came, was it a man or a horse? To the waist, a man with red hair and beard, but below there was a horse's gleaming chestnut body with long reddish tail. Harry and Hermione's jaws dropped. Oh, it's you, Ronan, said Hagrid in relief. How are you? He walked forward and shook the centaur's hand. Good evening to you, Hagrid, said Ronan in a deep, sorrowful voice. Were you going to shoot me? Can't be too careful, Ronan, said Hagrid, patting his crossbow. There's something bad loose in this forest. This is Harry Potter and Hermione Granger, by the way. Students up at the school. And this is Ronan, you two. He's a centaur. We noticed, said Hermione faintly. Good evening, said Ronan. Students, are you? And do you learn much up at the school? Oh, that's who it is. What's up, Nancy? I was like, who are you? A bit, said Hermione timidly. A bit. Well, that's something, Ronan sighed. He flung back his head and stared at the sky. Mars is bright tonight. Yeah, said Hagrid, glancing up too. Listen, I'm glad we run into you, Ronan, because there's a unicorn been bit. You seen anything? Ronan didn't answer immediately. He stared unblinkingly upward, then sighed again. Always the innocent are the first victims, he said. So it has been for ages past. So it is now. Yeah, said Hagrid. But have you seen anything, Ronan? Anything unusual? Mars is bright tonight, Ronan repeated, while Hagrid watched him impatiently. Unusually bright. Yeah, but I was meaning something unusual a bit nearer home, said Hagrid. So you haven't noticed anything strange? Yet again, Ronan took a while to answer. At last he said, The forest hides many secrets. A movement in the trees behind Ronan made Hagrid raise his bow again, but it was only a second centaur, black-haired and bodied and wilder looking than Ronan. Hello, Bane, said Hagrid. All right. I'm going to do it as Bane. Hello, Hagrid. I hope you're well. Well enough. Look, I've just been asking Ronan, you see anything odd in here lately? There's a unicorn been injured. Did you know anything about it? Bane walked over to stand next to Ronan. He looked skyward. Mars is bright tonight, he said simply. We've heard, said Hagrid grumpily. Well, if either of you do see anything, let me know, won't you? We'll be off then. Harry and Hermione followed him out of the clearing, staring over their shoulders at Ronan and Bane until the trees blocked their view. Just imagining like Bane just looking up and like, oh, you think Mars is your ally. You merely adopted them. I was born in Mars, molded by it. Never, said Hagrid irritably, try and get a straight answer out of a centaur. Ruddy stargazers, not interested in anything closer than the moon. Are there many of them in here? Asked Hermione. Oh, fair few. Keep themselves to themselves mostly, but they're good enough about turning up if I want a word. They're deep, mind centaurs. They know things, just don't let on much. Do you think that was a centaur we heard earlier? Said Harry. Did that sound like us to you? Nah. If you ask me, that's what's been killing the unicorns. Never heard anything like it before. They walked on through the. I mean, could have just been a snake. Like, couldn't they? Like, it's a forest, and there are snakes. Like, if it sounds like slithering, my first thought would be like, it's a big snake. No, that's for another book. Stupid. They walked on through the dense, dark trees. Harry kept looking nervously over his shoulder. He had a nasty feeling that they were being watched. He was very glad they had Hagrid and his crossbow with them. They had just passed a bend in the path when Hermione grabbed Hagrid's arm. Hagrid, look! Red spots! The other's in trouble! You two wait here! Hagrid shouted. Stay on the path. I'll come back for you. They heard him crashing away through the undergrowth and stood looking at each other, very scared, until they couldn't hear anything but the rustling of leaves around them. You don't think they've been hurt, do you? Whispered Hermione. I don't care if Malfoy has, but if something's got Neville, it's all fault he's here in the first place. The minutes dragged by. Their ears seemed sharper than usual. Harry seemed to be picking up every sigh of the wind, every crackling twig. What was going on? Where were the others? At last, a great crunching noise announced Hagrid's return. Malfoy, Neville, and Fang were with him. Hagrid was fuming. Malfoy, it seemed, had sneaked up behind Neville and grabbed him as a joke. Neville had panicked and set up the sparks. We'll be lucky to catch anything now with the racket you two are making. Right. We're changing groups. Neville, you stay with me and Hermione. Harry, you go with Fang and this idiot. I'm sorry, Hagrid added in a whisper to Harry, but he'll have a harder time fighting you. We gotta get this done. So Harry set off into the heart of the forest with Malfoy and Fang. They walked for nearly half an hour, deeper and deeper into the forest, until the path became almost impossible to follow because the trees were so thick. Giggity giggity, giggity goo. Harry thought the blood seemed to be getting thicker. There were splashes on the roots of a tree, as though the poor creature had been thrashing around in pain close by. Harry could see a clearing ahead through the tangled branches of an ancient oak. Look, he murmured, holding out his arm to stop Malfoy. Something bright white was gleaming on the ground. They inched closer. It was the unicorn, all right, and it was dead. Harry had never seen anything so beautiful and sad. Its long, slender legs were stuck out at odd angles where it had fallen, and its mane was spread pearly white on the dark leaves. Harry had taken one step toward it with a slithering sound made him freeze where he stood. A bush on the edge of the clearing quivered. Then out of the shadows, a hooded figure came crawling out of the ground like some stalking beast. Harry, Malfoy, and Fang stood transfixed. The cloaked figure reached the unicorn, lowered its head over the wound on the animal's side, and began to drink its blood. Ah! Malfoy let out a horrible scream and bolted. So did Fang. The hooded figure raised its head and looked right at Harry. Unicorn blood was dribbling down its front. It got to its feet and came swiftly toward Harry. He couldn't move for fear. Then a pain like he'd never felt before pierced his head. It was as though his scar were on fire. Half blinded, he staggered backward. He heard hooves behind him, galloping, and something jumped clean over Harry, charging at the figure. The pain in Harry's head was so bad he fell to his knees. It took a minute or two to pass. Then he looked up. The figure had gone. A centaur was standing over him, not Ronan or Bane. This one looked younger. He had white blonde hair and palomino body. Are you all right? Said the centaur, pulling Harry to his feet. Yes, thank you. What was that? Centaur didn't answer. He had astonishingly blue eyes, like pale sapphires. He looked carefully at Harry, his eyes lingering on the scar that stood out, livid, on Harry's forehead. You are the Potter boy, he said. You had better get back to Hagrid. The forest is not safe at this time, especially for you. Can you ride? It will be quicker this way. My name is Ferenz, he added, as he lowered himself onto his front legs so that Harry could clamber onto his back. There was suddenly a sound of more galloping from the other side of the clearing. Ronan and Bane came first, bursting through the trees. their flanks heaving and sweaty. Lorenz! Bane thundered. What are you doing? You have a human on your back. Have you no shame? Are you a common mule? Son of a bitch. Do you realize who this is? Said Ferenz. This is the Potter boy. The quicker he leaves this forest, the better. What have you been telling him? Growled Bane. Remember, Ferenz, we are sworn not to let ourselves against the heavens. Have we not read what is come in the movements of the planets? Ronan pawed the ground nervously. I'm sure Ferenz thought he was acting for the best, he said in his gloomy voice. Bane kicked his legs back in anger. His back legs, excuse me. For the best? What has that to do with us? Centaurs are concerned with what has been foretold. It is not our business to run around like donkeys after stray humans in our forest. Ferenz suddenly reared on his hind legs in anger, so that Harry had to grab his shoulders to stay on. Do you not see that unicorn? Ferenz bellowed at Bane. Do you not understand why it was killed? Or have the planets not let you in on that secret? I set myself against what is lurking in that forest, Bane. Yes, with humans alongside me if I must. And Ferenz whisked around, with Harry clutching on as best as he could. They plunged off into the trees, leaving Ronan and Bane behind them. Harry didn't have a clue what was going on. Well, yeah, there's 7 books to prove that. Why is Bane so angry? He asked. What was that thing you saved me from anyway? Ferenz slowed to a walk, warned Harry to keep his head bowed in case of low-hanging branches, but did not answer Harry's question. They made their way through the trees in silence for so long that Harry thought Ferenz didn't want to talk to him anymore. They were passing through a particularly dense patch of trees, however, when Ferenz suddenly stopped. Harry Potter, do you know what unicorn blood is used for? No, said Harry, startled by the odd question. We've only used the horn and tail hair in potions. That is because it is a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn, said Ferenz. Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch away from death, but at a terrible price. You have slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you have but a half-life, a cursed life, from the moment the blood touches your lips. Harry stared at the back of Ferenz's head, which was dappled silver in the moonlight. But who'd be that desperate? He wondered aloud. If you're going to be cursed forever, death's better, isn't it? It is, Ferenz agreed. Unless all you need is to stay alive long enough to drink something else. Something that will bring you back to full strength and power. Something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment? The Sorcerer's Stone! Of course, the elixir of life. But I don't understand who. Can you think of nobody who has waited many years to return to power? Who has clung to life, awaiting their chance? It was as though an iron fist had clenched suddenly around Harry's heart. Over the rustling of the trees, he seemed to hear once more that Hagrid had told him on the night that they had met. Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Don't know if he had enough human left in him to die. Do you mean, Harry croaked, that was full... Harry! Harry, are you all right? Hermione was running toward them down the path, Hagrid puffing along behind her. I'm fine, said Harry, hardly knowing what he was saying. The unicorn's dead, Hagrid. It's in that clearing back there. This is where I leave you, Ferenz murmured as Hagrid hurried off to examine the unicorn. You are safe now. Harry slid off his back. Good luck, Harry Potter, said Ferenz. The planets have been read wrongly before now, even by centaurs. I hope this is one of those times. He turned and cantered back into the depths of the forest, leaving Harry shivering behind him. Ron had fallen asleep in the dark common room, waiting for them to return. He shouted something about Quidditch fouls when Harry roughly shook him awake. Quidditch fouls. In a matter of seconds, though, he was wide-eyed as Harry began to tell him and Hermione what had happened in the forest. Harry couldn't sit down. He paced up and down in front of the fire. He was still shaking. Snape wants the stone for Voldemort, and Voldemort's waiting in the forest. And all this time, we thought Snape just wanted to get rich. Stop saying the name, said Ron in a terrified whisper, as if he thought Voldemort could hear them. Harry wasn't listening. Firenze saved me, but he shouldn't have done so. Bane was furious. He was talking about interfering with what the plans say is going to happen. They must show that Voldemort's coming back. Bane thinks Firenze should have let Voldemort kill me. I suppose that's written in the stars as well. Will you stop saying the name? Ron hissed. So all I've got to wait for now is Snape to steal the stone, Harry went on feverishly. Then Voldemort will be able to come and finish me off. Well, I suppose Bane will be happy. Hermione looked very frightened, but she had a word of comfort. Harry, Hermione, everyone says Dumbledore is the only one you know who was ever afraid of. With Dumbledore around, you know who won't touch you. Anyway, who says the Centaur's all right? It sounds like fortune telling to me. And Professor McGonagall says that's a very imprecise branch of magic. The sky had turned light before they stopped talking. They went to bed exhausted, their throats sore. But the night's surprises weren't over. When Harry pulled back his sheets, he found his invisibility cloak folded neatly underneath him. There was also a note pinned to it, just in case. End of chapter 15. Let's see what time we got. Oh, yeah, we still got an hour. Give me 1 second. Let me crack open another beer. That's how much we have left, by the way. We're getting pretty close. I think by next week we'll be done. Where's that beer? Here's that beer. Who's got my beer? I've got my beer. Chapter 16, Through the Trapdoor. In years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he had managed to get through his exams, when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still alive and well behind the locked door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classroom where they did their written papers. They had been given special new quills for the exams, which had been bewitched with an anti-cheating spell. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make pineapple tap dance across the desk. What kind of useless spell is that? Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion. That's ironic. Trying to remember how to make a forgetfulness potion? Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip into the forest. Buddy, I sympathize. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth was that Harry had been kept woken by his old nightmare, except that it was now worse than ever, because there was a hidden figure dripping blood in it. Maybe it was because they hadn't seen what Harry had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning on their foreheads. But Ron and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in their dreams. And they were so busy with their studying, they didn't have much time to fret about what Snape or anyone else might be up to. Their very last exam was History of Magic. 1 hour of answering questions about batty old wizards who'd invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for a whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest. That was far easier than I thought it would be, said Hermione as they joined the crowds flocking out onto the sunny grounds. I needn't have learned about the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct or the uprising of Elfric the Eager. Oi, dogs! Shut the fuck up! Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterward, but Ron said this made him feel ill. So they wandered down the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid, which was basking in the warm shallows. No more studying, Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. You can look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry yet. Harry was rubbing his forehead. I wish I knew what this means, he burst out angrily. My skull keeps hurting. It's happened before, but never as often as this. Go to Madame Pomfrey, Hermione suggested. I'm not ill, said Harry. I think it's a warning. It means danger's coming. Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. Speaking of which, I love that Steph made me this, but it's kind of a warm fucking day. Plus I got a fire behind me. That's better. Yeah. Reading Harry Potter and stripping for you guys. Harry, relax. Hermione's right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never had any proof Snape found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly had his leg ripped off once. He's not going to go try it again. Now, Harry. And Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid lets Dumbledore down. Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off a lurking feeling that there was something he'd forgotten to do. Something important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione said, That's just the exams. I woke up last night, was halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered we'd done that one. Harry was quite sure the unsettling feeling didn't have anything to do with work, though. He watched an owl flutter toward the school across the bright blue sky, a note clamped to its mouth. Hagrid was the only one who had ever sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never. But Harry suddenly jumped to his feet. Where are you going? Said Ron sleepily. I've just thought of something, said Harry. He turned white. We've got to go and see Hagrid now. Why? Panted Hermione, trying to keep up. Don't you think it's a bit odd, said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon, and a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people wander around with dragon eggs and if it's against wizard law? Lucky they found Hagrid, don't you think? Why didn't I see it before? What are you talking about? Said Ron, but Harry, sprinting across the grounds toward the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. Hello, he said, smiling. Finish your exams? Got time for a drink? Yes, please, said Ron, but Harry cut him off. No, we're in a hurry. Hagrid, I've got to ask you something. You know the night you won Norbert? What did the stranger you were playing cards with look like? I know, said Hagrid casually. He wouldn't take his cloak off. He saw the three of them looking stunned and raised his eyebrows. It's not that unusual. You get a lot of funny folk in the Hog's Head. That's the pub down the village. Might have been a dragon dealer, mightn't he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up. There he sank down next to the bowl of peas. What did you talk to him about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all? Might have come up, said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. Yeah, he asked what I did, and I told him I was gamekeeper here. He asked a bit about the sort of creatures I look after, so I told him, and I said what I'd always wanted was a dragon. And then I can't remember too well because he kept buying me drinks. Let's see. Yeah, then he said he had the dragon egg and we could play cards, right, if I wanted. But he had to be sure I can handle it. He didn't want to go to any old home. So I told him after Fluffy, a dragon would be easy. And did he seem interested in Fluffy? Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Well, Yeah, how many three-headed dogs do you meet, even around Hogwarts? So I told them, Fluffy's a piece of cake if you just know how to calm him down. Just play him a bit of music and he'll go straight off to sleep. Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. I shouldn't have told you that, he blurted out. Forget I said it. Harry, where you going? Harry, Ron, Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed very cold and gloomy after the grounds. We've got to go to Dumbledore, said Harry. Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy, and it was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy once he'd got Hagrid drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Firenze might back us up if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office? They looked around as if hoping to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had ever been sent to see him. We'll just have to, Harry began, but a voice suddenly rang across the hall. What are you three doing inside? It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a large pile of books. We want to see Professor Dumbledore, said Hermione rather bravely, Harry and Ron thought. See Professor Dumbledore, Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. Why? Harry swallowed. Now what? It's sort of a secret, he said, but he wished at once he hadn't, because Professor McGonagall's nostrils flared. Professor Dumbledore left 10 minutes ago, she said coldly. He received an urgent owl from the Ministry of Magic and flew off for London at once. He's gone, said Harry frantically. Now! 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 Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, Potter. He's had many demands on his time, but this is important. Something you have to say is more important than the Ministry of Magic, Potter. Look, said Harry, throwing caution to the winds. Professor, it's about the Sorcerer's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The books she was carrying tumbled out of her arms, but she didn't pick them up. How do you know? She spluttered. Professor, I think I know that someone's going to try and steal the stone. I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow, she said finally. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one could possibly steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she says shortly. She bent down and gathered up the fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine. But they didn't. It's tonight, said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. Snape's going through the trapdoor tonight. He's found out everything he knows, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore turns up. But what can we... Hermione gasped. Harry and Ron wheeled around. Snape was standing there. Good afternoon, he said smoothly. He stared at him. You shouldn't be outside on a day like this, he said with an odd, twisted smile. We were... Harry began without any idea what he was going to say. You want to be more careful, said Snape. Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor really can't afford to lose any more points, can it? Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. Be warned, Potter. Any more nighttime wanderings, and I will personally make sure you are expelled. Good idea. He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. Right, here's what we got to do, he whispered. One of us has got to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves it. Hermione, you better do that. Why me? It's obvious, said Ron. You could pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick, you know. He put on a higher voice. Oh, Professor Flitwick, I'm so worried. I think I've got a question 14B wrong. Oh, shut up, said Hermione, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. And we better stay outside the third floor corridors, Harry told Ron. Come on. But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. I suppose you think you'd harder to get past than a pack of enchantments, she stormed. Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you come anywhere near here again, I'll take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house. Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, "At least Hermione's on Snape's tail," when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came in. "I'm sorry, Harry," she wailed. "Snape came out and asked what I was doing, so I said I was waiting for Flitwick, and Snape went to get him. And I've only just got away. I don't know where Snape went." "Well, that's it then, isn't it?" Harry said. The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. "I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try and get the stone first." "You're mad," said Ron. "You can't," said Hermione. "After what McGonagall and Snape have just said, you'll be expelled." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Don't you understand? If Snape gets hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it was like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it, or turn it into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do you think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I get to the stone, well, I'll have to go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to find me there. It's only dying a bit later than I would have, because I'm never going to go over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two say is going to stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember?" He glared at them. "You're right, Harry," said Hermione in a small voice. "I'll use the invisibility cloak," said Harry. "It's just lucky I got it back." "But will it cover all three of us?" said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it. You don't think we'll let you go alone?" "Of course not," said Hermione briskly. "How do you think you'd get to the stone without us? I better go and look through my books. There might be something useful." "But if we get caught, you two will be expelled." "Not if I can help it," said Hermione grimly. "Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on his exam. They're not throwing me out after that." After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore, after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through all her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. And I'm about to do what I've been thinking I want to do. Slowly, the room emptied as people drifted off to bed. "Better get the cloak," Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to the dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed to use on Fluffy. He didn't feel much like singing. Need a lime. Yeah, well, I don't have a lime. He ran back down to the common room. "We better put the cloak on here and make sure it covers all three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own." "What are you doing?" said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the toad, who looked as though he had been making another bid for freedom. "Nothing, Neville, nothing," said Harry hurriedly, putting the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. "You're going out again," he said. "No, no, no," said Hermione. "No, we're not. Why don't you go to bed, Neville?" Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste any more time. Snape might even now be playing Fluffy to sleep. "You can't go out," said Neville. "You'll be called again. Gryffindor will be even more trouble." "You don't understand," said Harry. "This is important." But Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. "Okay. All right, CJ, I'll try to remind you." I won't let you do it, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville! Ron exploded. Get away from that hole and don't be an idiot. Don't you call me an idiot, said Neville. I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me told me to stand up to people. Yes, but not to us, said Ron in exasperation. Neville, you don't know what you're doing. He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor, the toad, who leaped out of sight. Go on then, try and hit me, said Neville, raising his fist. I'm ready. Damn, Neville, you're like, all right, you motherfuckers, let's go. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something, he said desperately. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, I'm really, really sorry about this. She raised her wand. Petrificus totalis, she cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides. Okay. What's up, Jojo? All right. His legs sprang together, his whole body rigid. He swayed where he stood, and then he fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaws were jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking at them in horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. It's the full body bind, said Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, I'm so sorry. We had to, Neville. No time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow looked like Filch. Every distant breath of wind sounded like Peeves swooping down on them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. Oh, let's just kick her just this once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes on them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else till they reached the staircase up the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. Who's there? He said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. Know you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you ghouly or ghosty or wee-suited beastie? He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. Should I call Filch? I should, if something's a-creeping around unseen. Harry had a sudden idea. Please, he said in a hoarse whisper, the bloody Baron has his own reasons for being invisible. Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. So sorry, your bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir, he said greasily. My mistake, my mistake. I didn't see you. Of course I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peasy. Is it a joke, sir? I have business here, Peeves, croaked Harry. Stay away from this place tonight. I will, sir, I most certainly will, said Peeves, rising up in the air again. Hope your business goes well, Baron. I'll not bother you. And he fucked off. Brilliant, Harry, whispered Ron. A few seconds later, there they were, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. Well, there we are, Harry said quietly. Snape's already got past Fluff. The open door somehow seemed to impress upon all three of them what was facing them. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other two. You want to go back, I won't blame you, he said. You can take back the cloak. I won't need it now. Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open. As the door creaked, low rumbling growls met their ears. All three of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. What's that at its feet? Hermione whispered. Looks like a hop, said Ron. Snape must have left it here. It must wake up the moment you stop playing, said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note, the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly, the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws and fell to its knees, and it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Ron warned Harry as they slipped out of the cloak and crept toward the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached the giants' heads. I think we'll be able to pull the door open, said Ron, peering over the dog's back. Want to go first, Hermione? No, I don't. All right. Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor, which swung up and open. What can you see? Hermione said anxiously. Nothing, just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop. Harry, who waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. You want to go first? Are you sure? Said Ron. I don't know how deep this thing goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep. Harry handed the flute over. In the few seconds' silence, the dog growled and twitched. But the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into its deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign at the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked up at Ron and said, If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the Owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, right? Right, said Ron. See you in a minute, I hope. And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell down, 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 and flump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. I guess that's what a flump is. He sat up and felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. It's okay, he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. It's a soft landing. You can jump. Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. What's this stuff? Were his first words. Don't know. Some sort of plant thing. I suppose it's hard to break the fall. It's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione. The distant music stopped. There was a loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. We must be miles under the school, she said. Miles under the school. That's a long, long, long drop then. That's a really long drop if you're miles under the school, especially if you're on the third floor corridor. So, no. Lucky this plant thing's here, really, said Ron. Lucky! Shrieked Hermione. Look at you both! She leaped up and struggled toward a damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she had landed, the plant had started to twist snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without their noticing. Damn, they're stupid. Oh my God, you're so stupid. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving, Hermione ordered them. I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare. Oh, I'm so glad we know what it's called. That's a great help, snarled Ron, leaning back trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. Shut up. I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up. I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's snare. What did Professor Sprout say? It likes the dark and the damp. So light a fire! Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? To be fair, there isn't any wood. It sounds like something Ron would say. It's not often that, Ron is the voice of reason here. Oh, right, said Hermione as she whipped out her wand, waved it, muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flame she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosening its grip as it cringed away from the light and warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled itself from their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention to homology, Hermione, said Harry as they joined her by the wall, wiping sweat off his face. Yeah, said Ron. And lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood. Honestly. This way, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. We still got 25 minutes. We're making good progress. All they could hear, apart from their footsteps, were the gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, you remember the dragons said to be guarding vaults in the Wizard's Bank. If they met a dragon, a fully grown dragon, Norbert had been bad enough. Can you hear something? Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling and clinking seemed to be coming from up ahead. Do you think it's a ghost? I don't know. Sounds like wings to me. There's light ahead. I can see something moving. They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber. Its ceiling arching high above them was full of small, jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around the room. On the opposite side of the chamber was a heavy wooden door. Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room? Said Ron. Probably, said Harry. They don't look very vicious, but I suppose if we all swoop down at once, well, there's no other choice. I'll run. He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge, not even when Hermione tried her Alohomora charm. Now what? Said Ron. These birds. They can't be here just for decoration, said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. Glittering? They're not birds, Harry said suddenly. They're keys. Winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean, he looked around the chamber, while the other two squinted up at the flock of keys. Yes, look, broomsticks. We've got to catch the key to the door. But there are hundreds of them. Ron examined the lock on the door. We're looking for a big, old-fashioned one, probably silver, like the handle. They each seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched keys darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, though, was Harry the youngest seeker in a century. He had a knack for spotting things other people couldn't. Thank you, CJ. After a minute's weaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if it had already been caught and stuffed roughly into the keyhole. Kickety, kickety. That one, he called the others. That big one. There, with bright blue wings. The feathers are all crumpled on one side. Ron went speeding in the direction that Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and nearly fell off his broom. We've got to close in on it, Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. Ron, you come at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try and catch it. Right now! Ron dived. Hermione rocketed upward. The key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped toward the wall. Harry leaned forward and with a nasty crunching noise pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, the key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked open, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. Ready? Harry asked the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded the room to reveal an astonishing sight. Let's see. Well, so I'm going to stop at like, let's see, food. Yeah, CJ, you just tell me when to stop. Like, I want it recorded, so it's probably about another, what, 10 minutes? Five up. Thank you. 50. So 15 minutes. Um, they were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard behind the black chessmen, which were all taller than they were and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. Now what do we do? Harry whispered. It's obvious, isn't it? Said Ron. We've got to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think we're going to have to be chessmen. He walked up to a black knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stones sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned its helmeted head to look down at Ron. Do we have to join you to get across? The black knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. This needs thinking about, he said. I suppose we've got to take the place of 3 of the black pieces. Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally, he said, Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are that good at chess. We're not offended, said Harry quickly. Just tell us what to do. Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you go next to instead of that castle. What about you? Oh, I'm going to be a knight. Well, of course you are. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at these words, a knight, a bishop, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and fucked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look. A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry, move diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock came when their other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take that bishop. Hermione, go on. So what does that mean if, like, the humans are, like, taking the pieces? Like, the pieces just fuck each other up. But, like, do the humans, like, just smack it and then it just crumbles, or what? They just pull out their 9. Every time one of their men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon there was a huddle of limp black players slumped along the wall. Twice, Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had lost black ones. When nearly there, he muttered suddenly, Let me think. The white queen turned her blank face toward him. Yes, said Ron softly. It's the only way. I've got to be taken. No, Harry and Hermione shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I take 1 step forward, and she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate the king, Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look, if you don't hurry up, he'll already have the stone. There was no alternative. Ready? Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm, and he crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed but stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he had been knocked the fuck out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 paces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead clear. With one last desperate look back at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if he'll be all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon next? Well, we've had Sprouts. That was the devil's snare. Flitwick must have put charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. They had reached another door. All right, Harry whispered. Go on. Harry pushed it open. A disgusting smell filled their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes up over their noses. Eyes watering, they saw, flat on the floor in front of them, a troll, even larger than the one they had tackled, out cold with a bloody lump on its head. Glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered, as he stepped carefully over one of its massive legs. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled open the next door. Both of them had hardly daring to look at what was coming next. But there was nothing very frightening in here. Just a table with 7 differently shaped bottles standing on it in a line. See, it sucks that they didn't include this part in the movie because this was like really, really like integral. It's not about magic. It's about logic and reasoning. That is what's important. But no! Snape's, said Harry. What do we have to do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up between them and the doorway. It wasn't ordinary fire either. It was purple. At the same instant, black flames shot up in the doorway leading onward. They were trapped. Look! Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry looked over his shoulder to read it. Danger lies before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. One among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers, waiting hidden in line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we give you these clues 4. First, however slyly the poison tries to hide, you will always find some on nettle wine's left side. Second, different are those who stand on either end. But if you would move onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, all are different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second on the right are twins once you taste them, though different at first sight. Hermione let out a great sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling. The very last thing he felt like doing. Brilliant, said Hermione. This isn't magic, it's logic. A puzzle. A lot of the greatest wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever. But so will we, won't we? Of course not, said Hermione. Everything we need is here on this paper. 7 bottles, 3 are poison, 2 are wine, 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us through the purple. But how do we know which to drink? Give me a minute. Hermione read the paper several times, then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At last she clapped her hands. Gulp it, she said. The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire, toward the stone. Harry looked at the tiny bottle. There's only enough there for one of us, he said. That's hardly 1 swallow. Which, there shouldn't be any. Like, there absolutely should be no potion because they would need it to go forward, like the person that went, like, you see what I'm saying? There should not be any leftover. They should have been just stuck right there. But no! They looked at each other. Which one will get you back through the purple flames? Hermione pointed a round bottle at the right end of the line. You drink that, said Harry. No, hold on, let's see which we got. All right, just in time because we're almost done with this chapter. That's a good place to stop. You drink that, said Harry. No, listen, get back and get Ron. Grab brooms from the flying key room. They'll get you out the trapdoor and past Fluffy. Go straight to the owlery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm in no match for him, really. But, Harry, what if you know who's with him? Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I? Said Harry, pointing at his scar. I might get lucky again. Hermione's lip trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione! Harry, you're a great wizard, you know. No, he's not. He hasn't done anything, like, apart from fly and catch a snitch. No, he's not a great wizard. He's lucky. I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let go of him. Me, said Hermione. Books and cleverness. There are more important things. Friendship and bravery and... Oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison, said Harry anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Quick, go, before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Fuck off, go! Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. Here I come, he said, and he drained the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as though ice was flooding his body. He put the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself, saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment, he could see nothing but dark fire. Then he was on the other side, in the last chamber. There was already someone there, but it wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. End of chapter 16, and that is where we will stop today. We'll have to find out who it is next week.